Hi there. For today's page I'm going to be using watercolor paper and watercolor stamps and some mist to create a background. I'm using 2-inch squares cut out of the watercolor paper, and I'm doing 25 of them, and they'll create a 10 by 10 page that will go on a background. I've got a beach themed photo that I want to use, and I'll be adding some ribbons and trims. So I have all of my watercolor papers, and some of them I'm going to paint on the rough side and some on the smoother side, just to get some differences in the texture. And I'm just layering on my watercolor pretty thick, kind of not real smooth. I want it to have a kind of a textured look. And I'll be adding some more things on top of it, but this first layer is just getting some color down. Some of these I'm doing in one color, and others I'm going to do multiple colors on the same square. I'm also going to use a technique that I learned out of a book for painting on scrapbook pages, and it was to add salt to your very watery watercoloring, and the salt sort of absorbs some of the water, and it creates a really interesting look once it's dried. So I've set that aside to dry. And here's one where I'm adding multiple colors, or multiple shades of the same color. Since this is a beach theme, everything is going to be blues and greens and yellows. Here's a little more salt to sprinkle on, and it does work best if you let it completely dry if you're using the salt. Two different shades there of greens, and this one I'm stamping on it while it's wet, and you let it dry a little bit before you stamp, and then I'm sorry that got off camera, but then you can see that it shows the sort of the relief of the stamp. You'll be able to see this one a little bit better, and this one I'm going to use the heat gun to dry it, because the stamp doesn't work well on it if it's too wet, so it needs to be at least partially dry. So you can let it air dry or heat it with the heat gun. Now I'm using a background stamp, and I actually got the middle a little bit too dry and it didn't quite pick up, but you can see the around the edges some of the design there. I do this with all the different squares, and now I'm ready to arrange or to work on them a little bit more. And the first thing I'm doing is pulling out some that I think have enough going on. Either they have the salt on them or they have the stamping, and those I'm setting aside. And the ones that are left, I will do some additional stamping, misting, different things to them. So I have a stamp here. This is supposed to be a sunshine, but I just repeated it as a sort of a generic kind of image over and over on one of my yellow squares to give that a little bit more interest. I've got these little circle images. Things like this are really workhorses in my craft room, to use these kind of images over and over again on different projects. And they always look different with different inks and different techniques. And here's another one. For this one, I'm only going to do just the outside edges, so it kind of looks like it was a piece of pattern paper cut out instead of specifically placed. And here I've used that same swirly stamp that I used for the relief earlier, and I'm using some fluid chalk ink and stamping it onto some of the dried watercolor squares, and you get a lot more of the image showing doing it this way than you do with the relief. So it's just a different kind of look. Misting is another way to add some interest to these. I have this bubble mask from Studio Calico, and I'm using some of their mist, or that may be some Color Shine mist. I can't remember which one I used. This is definitely some Color Shine mist, and this particular mask came from the regular craft department at Michael's. So your masks can come out of the stenciling area for home stencil kind of designs. They don't have to come out of the scrapbooking area, and you can still get some really pretty masks, and they're pretty inexpensive in that part of the craft store. For some of the squares, I added some additional sheen with some Tattered Angels mist. This is a light blue color, and Tattered Angels, most of their mists don't give you tons of color, at least the ones that I've used, but they give you a lot of shine. And I didn't want to make all of my squares shiny, so when they're arranged, some of them will be more matte and some of them will have more sheen to them. At this point, I've kind of laid everything out, at least one pass of it, and I'm rearranging a few of the squares so that I don't have things that look alike right side by side. Here's my photo, and I'm going to be turning this on point, so I want to see how the photo looks and make sure that the squares that I really like are the ones that are definitely going to be visible. Just a little bit more moving around there. And it should be about ready to glue down. I had one there I didn't like that much, so I can hide it behind the photo. Now to glue them down, I cut a 10-inch square piece of cardstock, and this was kind of thin cardstock, and something I figured out pretty early on. I was adding the glue to the cardstock and then pressing the watercolor paper to it. I figured out that that wasn't the best way to go about it. I did the first row that way, but then I switched up, as you'll see in a moment, because what happened is with the glue sort of started to curl the paper underneath, and then the watercolor paper didn't stick to it, and the glue I'm using is Mod Podge. It's okay, I can come back and add some more glue to it as I go. And here I'm already figuring out that I'm going to have to put the glue on the watercolor paper, put the glue on the heavier paper, and then attach it to the lighter paper. That seems to be the trick. I don't have that much experience with Mod Podge, so still kind of figuring out the best ways to do things sometimes. And just continuing on, gluing them all down using, and they're just laid over on the side in the order that I want them arranged. And here's the whole thing glued down, and I am going to add just a little bit of glue with a small brush underneath some of the squares to make sure they have as much on there as possible without it kind of creeping out the edges, because this heavy watercolor paper needs a little bit of help to hold everything down. But I'm really liking how it's coming out, how it's looking. These are my favorite colors, these blues and greens and yellows. Now something that really helps this a lot is to put some books over the top of it, something weighted to hold it in place. So that's what I do, is I just lay my craft sheet over the top so it won't, none of the glue will stick or come through and stick, and just lay some books over it for a few hours, and that really helps everything to adhere down, and it's in good shape to put it on my white background. And I tried just a plain white cardstock sheet, you'll see here, and then I was just showing you that to show how it looked on white, and I didn't like that, so I added a little bit of mist. I put some yellow mist at the top, and then I sprinkled some blue mist at the bottom just to add a little bit of interest, because just completely white was too stark, I thought. And now I'm ready to start playing with trims, and I have a ton of trims. This in these colors. This one is from Webster's Pages. They make the most beautiful trims. This one I think is from Hobby Lobby, and I'm trying to decide whether I want it to go all the way across or just to go on a part of the page, just maybe just a little bit over from the left, or whether I want it to go all the way across and meet the other trim in the middle. There's my favorite little yellow pom-pom fringe that I use with everything, but it didn't really match this shade of yellow. However, this trim from Stampin' Up! In Crushed Curry matched great, and it was flat, so it gave me some variety to some of the different kinds of other kinds of trims I had. This one turned out to be too busy, even though it had the right colors in there. I found that the trims that were just tone on tone, or maybe just had a little white in them or something, worked great. Now there's a pom-pom trim that's in a different color, and I feel like I can use a little bit of it. One I definitely wanted to work in was the sequin trim that I got on the sale rack at Hobby Lobby. I haven't got to use this very much, but it has this really fun theme to it, and I thought it really went with the bright, cheerful page. Especially when you see my title. My title is very cliched. It's "Don't worry, be happy." But I know that's a cliche, but that is so perfect for this page and what was going on in my life at the time that I didn't even need any journaling. The title said it all. So I was debating, though, which B to use, whether it's some thickers or these chipboard letters, and I decided I wanted it to be larger, so I'm going to use the chipboard letters, and I'm going to paint them an orange color and spray them with some Heidi Swapp Peach Mist. And I'm just playing a little bit more. I have some hearts. I love those little wooden hearts. And I think I'm going to use 3 of those, and that'll be kind of my triangle to tie things together. And I need to put something there at the bottom underneath the photo. I'm looking at some different chipboard pieces. I have one that I painted white just as an experiment to see how it would look, and I'm going to end up using it to put my date on there. Actually, I'm going to add a little bit of watercolor on top of it and then do the date. So now we see the final page. I decided not to make the trim go all the way across, but to have it over on the left side of the page and then the right side of the page. And I've got my 3 hearts, and I colored those with a peach colored marker. Used some small letters for the "Don't worry" and larger letters for the "Be happy." And I've repeated the trims in different places. So the orange trim is in a couple of places. That Webster's Pages trim is in 2 different places. So every trim, I think except maybe one, is repeated somewhere to give it some continuity. And there's my bee that I did with the paint and the mist. And I'll just show you some close-ups of the page. And I like this, how this came out so much. I put it in one of my frames. Since we love going to the beach, it's kind of a page for dreaming. But it was a lot of fun doing the painting on the watercolor paper and the misting and all. Thanks for watching today. Please visit my blog for more details.